Okay, students, today we are going to be wrapping up our unit on Virgil's Aeneid. Okay, so Aeneid part two. Here are my goals for today. Um, the whole PowerPoint is organized around this question that we ended last lecture on. This sort of suggestion that the Aeneid is both a celebration and a critique. So, I'm asking, is it a celebration or critique? But in a way, there's kind of both going on at the same time. And maybe how you answer this question might change based on the context in which you interpret the poem. But I think, from our perspective as contemporary readers, we can see both angles. So that's the sort of guiding principle for today's talk. So it critiques Aeneas himself as a character. Uh, he seems largely representative of like the best Roman because he chooses to do things based on duty rather than his personal desires or ethics, that kind of thing. He chooses to do his duty as a Roman. We'll also think about how the Aeneid, by extension, might be a celebration of Augustus, but also potentially a critique of him. So Augustus, again, is Rome's first emperor. And by that, by extension of that, perhaps the Aeneid is both celebrating empire and Rome itself, and also critiquing empire and Rome. And so these are actually pretty charged questions these days because I think, most of us are sort of living in a time that has been profoundly influenced by various empires, sort of colonial practices by other countries, and that sort of thing. So the Aeneid is actually a really interesting document that at a moment when people were first thinking about like the good of empire and also acknowledging its downfalls too. So this will all be kind of live. All these questions will be sort of live in this lecture. So hopefully it will resonate with how you're thinking about things even today. So in answering this question about the Aeneid being both celebration and critique, we'll consider, uh, we'll focus in on book 4, how Aeneas treats Dido. And what I'm referring to here is he marries her, although that's up for question, and then abandons her. So he's kind of a jerk to Dido. In book 6, we'll think about how, even though Aeneas is quite cruel to Dido, we'll consider that actually he might have also been cruel to himself. Because in book 6, it does appear that Aeneas really did love Dido. So why does he abandon her? In book 8, there's this kind of wonderful moment where Virgil is claiming that Aeneas' shield rivals and even surpasses Achilles' shield from the Iliad. So this kind of like wonderful description of a piece of art, also military defense, the shield. So we'll have that moment. And then in book 12, the last book of the Aeneid, will compare the death of Turnus to the death of Hector. And that will, I think, kind of elucidate some things here. And we'll be able to kind of think about, like, what is Virgil doing in the Aeneid in claiming that Rome has a connection to Troy? What is the legacy of Troy according to the Aeneid? Like, what does Rome inherit when Virgil claims a connection between Rome and Troy? So, in some ways, today's lecture will kind of bring a lot of threads that we've been discussing all semester together. So it'll be kind of interesting, hopefully, for you. Okay, let's get started. So, just sort of reminders from last time. Aeneas is this new type of epic hero. He is a hero who escapes. In some ways, you might see him as kind of like a loser. Like the Trojans lost the war, and yet Aeneas, a Trojan, is going to go on to heroically found a new civilization in Rome. So he's this hero who has to leave his homeland to found another one. Um, so a little bit like Odysseus in that way, except for home is transferable to a new place. We might also think about Aeneas being potentially the kind of original colonizer in a way, because Rome is really good at colonizing places, and its founding leader in this story, at least, is someone who moves from his original homeland to a new place to found home again. And so Aeneas is emphasized as this kind of family man. He brings his son. He also tries to bring his father along. He's a symbol of one's duty to family and nation and that kind of thing. Okay, so we also talked last time that Aeneas has some really interesting characteristics. He is very critical of Helen during the fall of Troy. He wants to kill her, and he's only stopped because his mother, Venus, the goddess of love, stops him. So this, I see this scene depicted here in this painting. I see this scene in the Aeneid as very symbolic of some of Aeneas's troubles to come in the Aeneid. He will have a really interesting relationship to love itself, personified in his mother perhaps, but also experienced when he falls in love with Dido. So we talked about last time that Aeneas is quite critical of Helen, but he'll act a lot like Helen later. And so to that end, I want to just do a side-by-side comparison of Aeneas's love life with Helen's love life, because they actually have a lot in common, even though they have this profound difference for the ancient world, which is gender. Okay, so Aeneas, he basically has three wives. Like maybe one of those is in quotation marks, but his first wife is Creusa. We don't hear too much about her. She's the woman he was married to in Troy. When Troy falls after the war, she dies there. So Aeneas is conveniently without a wife at the beginning of his story, beginning of his travels. But, that was a cynical way of saying it. A kind of more generous way of discussing this would be to say that Aeneas has lost a partner that he presumably loved. He had a child with this woman. He then, after he travels for a while, he ends up in Carthage. He meets Dido, the queen of Carthage. He marries her. I put this in quotes because we'll talk about this if you guys think he's actually married or not. But he does form this very intimate relationship with Dido. The gods are involved in this relationship. Then he abandons Dido in Carthage. He moves to the Italian peninsula, founds Rome, and then sort of solidifies his control over that kingdom by marrying Lavinia, who is the sort of princess in Italy of the sort of Latin tribe. She was someone else's fiance, and she marries Aeneas instead. So it's kind of interesting. He's a bit, I guess he's handsome. Maybe he's a bit of a playboy, I guess. But certainly a lot of women want to marry him. And he's kind of like fought over by women in a way. Okay, let's compare Helen. Obviously very much fought over, by men. So her first husband, of course, was Menelaus in Sparta, a Greek man. She's abducted, or maybe she falls in love with Paris. But regardless, she goes to Troy. She's married to Paris, whatever that means, I guess. Aphrodite is involved. So remember, Aphrodite and Venus are the same goddess. So love, the goddess of love, is involved in both cases for these guys. Her third husband, after Troy falls, the Trojans want to control Helen as much as they can still. They sort of force her into marrying another one of Priam's sons, so one of Paris's brothers. So maybe this was a consensual marriage, but maybe not. Kind of interesting. And then after the fall of Troy and the death of Paris and the death of Paris's brother, Helen is returned to her original husband in Sparta. Happily or not happily, as we read in the Odyssey. But anyway, so she's got at least three husbands, similar to Aeneas, who has at least, here at least we know that we know of, he has three wives. So they actually do have a lot in common as people, but the ancient world would of course see them very, very differently, because just by virtue of the fact that Aeneas is a man and Helen is a woman. Aeneas is a hero. He founds Rome. Helen is, I'm not sure if exactly we would call her a hero. She's certainly blamed for a lot of things. But I'm sort of suggesting in this slide that they might have a lot in common here in terms of blame and also heroism even too. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this marriage stuff. So first off, I want to introduce Dido herself. So Dido is this very compelling character in Virgil's Aeneid. People love Dido as a character. Virgil's Dido, his version of this woman, she's famous for these things. She's famous for falling in love. She's famous for falling in love through pity. She pities Aeneas, and by virtue of that pity, falls in love with him. And she's famous for being spurned, like being abandoned by Aeneas, even though she feels this profound love and pity for him. This image here I selected because I think it does a great job of picturing Virgil's version of Dido. I think from looking at this, we can see a particular way of interpreting Dido's character. This is from 10 BC to 45 AD, so this is after Virgil's Aeneid is published and circulated. It's very popular, and so this artist is depicting Dido influenced by Virgil's characterization of her. And so, like, looking at this, what would you say about their relationship? Who seems to be kind of like steering the ship in the relationship? Who seems more interested in the other partner? We can see from body language. I mean, she's like leaning onto him. Like if you saw these two like in a metro or like on a park bench, you'd be like, interesting. His arms are very far apart. He's not actively touching her. Like his hands are, as far apart from her as they could be. The artist could depict them both hugging each other, and that might be sort of more equal. But no, he has Aeneas kind of lounging on this thing. He's got a sword here. He's got some sort of staff here. He could be touching his girlfriend, but he's not. Meanwhile, the girlfriend, Dido, is like all about him. She's got both of her arms wrapped around him. She's looking towards him. She's leaning against him. This is a girlfriend who loves her boyfriend, and I'm not sure if the boyfriend is super interested in her because he's not even looking at her. Okay, this is Virgil's Dido. Here's another way of looking at Dido. As the centuries have gone on and people, read the Aeneid, translated it, copied it over and over again, for a large part of, Western history, the Aeneid was more important even than Homer's epics because people, after the fall of Rome, Latin remained kind of a language that people knew and had relative facility with, but Greek fell out of common knowledge. So people literally couldn't read Homer's epics. They could read the Aeneid, and so the Aeneid kind of keeps all these Greek stories alive, and it became super duper popular as a teaching tool for especially the upper classes, of course. And so like as the Aeneid grew more and more popular, so did Dido herself, and other aspects of her character that are present in Virgil's original. These other aspects are celebrated even more, kind of recognized, recognized in their own right. So, Virgil's Dido has these characteristics, but, if we just compare, like, from a Roman perspective, we would want to think of Dido as like the clingy girlfriend who is keeping our hero from founding our city. But later generations after the fall of Rome, they might not honor Aeneas as much. He would be seen as less of he's still a hero, but he wouldn't be seen as like our hero. And they might celebrate Dido's characteristics in and of herself. So like this image, I think, does a good job of demonstrating how powerful Dido is. She is a queen. She's queen of the city that she founds herself. And here we see her depicted as like really holding court. Like she's lounging, which, is a very relaxed pose, but she seems lounging and completely in control of things. This is her kingdom here. Carthage is on the northern part of Tunisia and North Africa. This is her palace. Aeneas is her guest, who's there because she's allowing him to be there. She's hearing his story. She's got her arm here around Aeneas' son. This is Dido's sister Anna, listening to. So, this is a very nice scene. I mean, everyone seems to be very like pleased with each other and happy, but she's the central figure here. Like the light is on her. She's got a crown on her head. She's very, very powerful. And I think this represents a lot of more contemporary interpretations of Dido. Like people love Dido. She's a great character and powerful. Okay, what's interesting about Virgil's depiction of Dido is that he picks Dido specifically. The queen of Carthage named Dido was a real person. So she existed in history. Virgil takes this real historical figure and, like a fan fiction author, he incorporates this real person into his sort of created story about the founding of Rome. So remember, Aeneas isn't really a real person. He's a character from the Iliad. Dido is that's not the case with Dido. She was actually a real person. So it's as if like if I were writing fan fiction about like the Harry Potter universe, and then I like wrote a character that's basically Justin Bieber who like comes into the Harry Potter universe and like mixes things up or something like that. So this is a bit like what Virgil's doing in creating this character who's not really a character. She's based on a real person. Okay, so the real person is what I'm talking about here. Queen Dido was originally the sister of this king Pygmalion of Tyre. I believe they're Phoenician. Their father, when he died, he said that he wanted to split the kingdom between the two of them, the brother and sister. But the people of Tyre preferred a boy. So they basically stripped Dido of her power that her father wanted to give her, which seems unfair to me. But anyway, Dido is, the original Dido is married to a rich man. Historically, this is understood to be her uncle. Pygmalion, when he comes of age as the king, their uncle is very rich. Pygmalion wants to control that money and to control his sister too. So he has the uncle killed so that he can take his money. However, Dido is very intelligent. She's able to outsmart her brother. She keeps the money and kind of tricks him into thinking it's lost. And because her brother has proven himself kind of tyrannical and a little bit cruel and evil and all this stuff, she gains a lot of followers. So when she outsmarts her brother, kind of keeps the money, she's able to like leave Tyre with followers of her now. So before, where people weren't following her, now they're following her to found a new city, and they leave from Tyre, which is in modern day Lebanon, to Carthage, which is in modern day Tunisia in North Africa. So this is probably in your mind, you should be thinking, wow, Dido is pretty amazing. She's a bit like Aeneas because she also leaves a situation that's not working and goes on to found a whole new city. It's pretty amazing, especially because she's female. So the historical Dido remains a popular cult figure in Tunisia, where women, Tunis women, call themselves daughters of Dido, kind of taking on her as a symbol of a powerful female figure. Virgil, so enter Virgil. He takes this like local tradition, this local lore, and then completely constructs this, fabricates this relationship that she has with his character Aeneas. So he's basically using her. He's appropriating this real person to kind of like suit his story. Okay, so here's some just evidence of the original Dido. So this was a coin used in the region with depicting Dido. And then, this is a more contemporary bit of currency from 2005 here of a Tunis, I guess a $10 or whatever their currency is, a note, where Dido is depicted on the currency. And like, of course, note that she's depicted without reference to Aeneas because Aeneas isn't like real, especially from a Tunisian perspective. Dido is a real person that they claim a connection to from their past. So anyway, great. So Dido. Okay, so this is what Virgil does. Her main kind of like plot point thing is to listen to Aeneas and then fall in love with him. So I'm going to pick the image that depicts Virgil's Dido a little bit more. So here's just kind of the plot of it. Juno and Venus, even though they usually fight with each other, they both agree to make Aeneas and Dido fall in love. They're like, okay, we're going to influence this romance. Juno, it's pretty clear why she wants Aeneas to fall in love, because Juno hates Aeneas. She also doesn't want him to found Rome, so she wants to kind of like waste his time. Like, what's a better way to waste someone's time and prevent them from like doing like grand things, but to like have them fall in love. Now, of course, this is suggesting that like love isn't a grand thing, which I think a lot of us would disagree with. But anyway, um, that's sort of Juno's motivations. Venus's motivations are a little bit um, harder to understand. I think maybe she just wants her son to fall in love. Um, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Okay, so keeps going. Dido, Virgil's Dido. She, as Queen of Carthage, her husband has been killed back in Tyre. So the Queen Dido, she tells everyone, and she commits to herself that she's not going to get married again. Now this would be so it's a vow of chastity. You could see it as her being like really committed to the memory of her husband. But I would suggest it's probably also a very political decision to never get married again. Because if you're the queen, if you get married, then you might have to kind of share power, particularly in the ancient world where men are more often associated with power positions. Dido perhaps is going to remain chaste so that she maintains her control over Carthage. Um, but Virgil kind of treats it as like she's just so chaste and so in love with her former husband. She worries marrying again will make her lose power. However, when she hears Virgil tell of his tragedies at Troy, she falls in love with him, with influenced by these goddesses. And as she's talking about her feelings to her sister Anna, Anna convinces Dido that actually it might be a good idea to marry Aeneas. They are reminded that Dido and Aeneas actually do have a lot in common. They're both enterprising founders of a kingdom. They overcame tragedies in their past, and maybe they just really get each other. Okay, so this is kind of one of the main issues of the Aeneid. Are these guys actually married or not? In some ways, we can see them as very much married, and in some ways, we're like, maybe they didn't get married. But this is a big issue because when Aeneas abandons Dido, he's either abandoning his married wife and acting. He's not so he wouldn't be a dutiful husband in that situation. However, if they don't get married, then maybe it's just sort of like maybe she expected too much of him, and they were just boyfriend and girlfriend. It's no big deal for him to move on. Okay, so this is the question. Now, this is I've excerpted the kind of description of their like marriage scene, and I'm going to read it aloud. As I read it, I just want you to note how strange this is as a marriage scene. Okay, I'll read it and then we'll talk. Okay, so to set the scene, Dido and Aeneas and everyone in the what do you call it, the kingdom, have gone out hunting. It's like a day of celebration. Juno and Venus, they're like, okay, this is the time to get these two together. They've been flirting. Let's get them together. So while everyone's out hunting, they bring on this like big rainstorm. And so like from if you've seen any like romantic comedies or like dramas or even like pornography, this happens whenever rain comes down. It's like a great moment for romance because people need to get into shelter. Okay, so that's what happens here. So it starts raining really bad. Aeneas and Dido find themselves alone, seeking shelter from the rain in a cave together. So caves are super hot, apparently. Okay, so now to the selfsame cave came Dido and the captain of the Trojans. Primal Earth herself and nuptial Juno opened the ritual. Torches of lightning blazed. High heaven became witness to the marriage. And nymphs cried out wild hymns from a mountaintop. That day was the first cause of death, and first of sorrow. Dido had no further qualms as to impressions given and set abroad. She thought no longer of a secret love, but called it marriage. Thus, under that name, she hid her fault. Okay, so this is pretty interesting. So I'll just draw your attention to to several things actually, but one to come up, to start things off is this indentation here seems to depict a very different change of tone. Like things in this half of the description are very like pro. This is a marriage, So like here's some images of like this is a marriage. So I put like happy faces depicting marriage. So they're both in the cave. Nuptial Juno was involved. Nuptial is a word that it basically is associated with marriage. Sometimes people refer to their wedding ceremony as their nuptials. Um, and Juno herself, she's a goddess of marriage, among other things. So Juno's here presiding over the marriage. She's the goddess of marriage. That seems legit. There's a ritual involved, apparently. So that's marriage rituals, where vows are exchanged, etc. High heaven became witness to the marriage. So, witnesses are there. So it's not just Dido and Aeneas in a cave. There's heaven as a witness. Although you might be thinking, can heaven really, sign a document as a witness? Don't you need people to witness things? Anyway. All right. Okay. And then nymphs are crying hymns and stuff like that. So definitely it's pitching their interaction in the cave as a marriage, even if we might have some suspicions that only goddesses and nymphs are witnesses. Nymphs are they're like minor goddesses. They're like little woodland creatures who probably aren't technically real, but they're goddesses in the Greek tradition. Okay, so those are all marriage evidence of the marriage actually taking place. However, all this language is pretty negative. That day was the first cause of death and first of sorrow. Dido thought no longer of a secret love. So until this moment in the cave, Dido had kept her love secret. But now she doesn't want to keep it a secret anymore. She doesn't care about impressions that she gives out or gossip that is set abroad. She doesn't care about what people say about her. She's in love with this man. She's going to call what they did in the cave marriage, and under that name hide her fault. So even though this is a narrator speaking here, he's being very critical of Dido here. He's saying what she does in the cave is her fault. It's something she calls marriage, implying that maybe it isn't marriage. So basically what happens is either in the cave they get married and have sex, or they just have sex. So this is part of the reason why this language is so weird is they're kind of, the Virgil and the narrator are sort of dancing around something that might be kind of smutty or dirty. I'm using these words that are they're kind of informal because I don't know. It's hard to describe what's going on here without kind of getting into the realm of maybe this isn't legitimate, I guess. So anyway, yeah, they have sex in a cave basically, and from Dido's perspective, we presume she thinks of it as a marriage. She doesn't have any qualms. She wants people to know that they love each other. But from Aeneas' perspective, perhaps, or from other perspectives, maybe they just had sex in a cave and now everyone knows that they're lovers, whether they're married or not. Okay, that's enough of that. But here's a depiction, artistic depiction of the moment in the cave. This is a landscape primarily, so it's a beautiful landscape. The storm is coming. Here's some goddesses bearing witness, nymphs, little Cupid figure kind of things. I guess there's a horse there. He's a witness too. I guess these are maybe the other hunters. But Dido, Aeneas in a cave, they're going to be together, have sex. And so even if they don't get married, when people see them coming out of the cave together, they're going to assume that they had sex in there. And that's kind of the point, I think, of this scene, that it's it's making public their private feelings for one another. And the two of them become boyfriend and girlfriend. They become very involved. This is a very what would you call it? It's an established relationship. They live together. They're lovers, Okay, so after a while, after Aeneas is living with Dido as her either husband or just lover, eventually Jupiter, the king of the gods, Jupiter is Zeus. In fact, Jupiter, people think it's Zeus Pater, so Father Zeus, Jupiter. So anyway, Jupiter and Mercury. Mercury is the Roman god of the messengers. He's a messenger god. He's equivalent to Hermes in the Greek tradition. So anyway, after Aeneas is living with Dido for a long time, Jupiter and Mercury decide we need to go tell him that he needs to get on with it. He needs to go found Rome and do his duty. Okay, so the he here is Mercury. So Mercury is sent down by Jupiter. Mercury, alighting tiptoe on the first hutments, there Mercury found Aeneas, laying foundations for new towers and homes. Mercury noted well with the sword hilt the man wore, adorned with yellow jasper, and the cloak aglow with Tyrian dye upon his shoulders, gifts of the wealthy queen who had inwoven gold thread in the fabric. Mercury took him to task at once. So this is what Mercury says. It is for you to lay the stones for Carthage's high walls, tame husband that you are, and build their city, oblivious of your own world, your own kingdom. And he goes on scolding him. But yeah, the sort of images, or the evidence here is that Aeneas has made himself a home in Carthage. He's dressed in Tyrian dye. So remember that Dido is from Tyre. So this dye that she presumably brings with her to Carthage, she like adorns her boyfriend slash husband with these great clothes. She's given him these gifts, whatever. He's like literally building towers and homes. He's like a contractor, you know? This is like a good boyfriend, right? Like he starts like building stuff when he moves in with you, I guess. But of course, Mercury and Jupiter behind him see this as like totally, what's the word? Shameful. Is it for you to lay the stones for Carthage's high walls? You're supposed to be laying the stones for Rome's high walls. It's like, dude, you're supposed to found Rome, not build Carthage up for her glory. You need yours. And then, yikes, he tame husband. Ouch. So like this is kind of language that I think people still sometimes use today, like tame husband. So this means like, presumably husbands should be like wild and roaming free, but Aeneas is a tame husband. He's been tamed by this woman who keeps him like you tame animals, you don't tame people. But here Aeneas has been tamed, by this powerful woman, presumably. Okay, so Mercury shames Aeneas, humiliates him really, and so Aeneas decides, wow, yeah, this guy's right. I'm like, I'm tame. I'm a tame husband. I need to get on with founding Rome. So like, what Aeneas does after this point is he basically tries to like ghost Dido. He tries to break up without confronting her directly. He starts going down to his ships, and like rigging them up so that he can eventually go to Rome. So he's like trying to move out basically, and doesn't want to talk to her about it. Finally, and Dido sees what he's doing. She's like, "You seem to be trying to move out," and so she confronts him. So it's like when someone tries to break up with their partner without like actually having the conversation, and then the other one is forced to confront the truth of the matter, which is that this relationship is doomed. Okay, so according to Aeneas, so this is Aeneas trying to defend himself for his behavior. She's like, "Don't you love me, Aeneas? I thought we were, married," etc. He goes, "As for myself, be sure, I never shall deny all you can say, your majesty, of what you meant to me. Never will the memory of Alyssa stale for me, while I can still remember my own life, and the spirit rules my body. As to the event," meaning the marriage, "a few words. Do not think I meant to be deceitful and slip away. I never held the torches of a bridegroom, never entered upon the pact of marriage." Okay, so yeah, he basically patently denies the fact that they were married. He's like, "I was never a groom. I never vowed, we never had a vow, a pact that we were married. We just slept together in a cave, presumably." And then his language is very like, I mean, this sounds nice, but if you were the person he's breaking up with, this would be very hard to hear. He says he'll never deny what she says, like everything she says is true, but note that he uses the past tense here. So he's like, "I never shall deny all you can say of what you meant to me." So it's like, yeah, you're right. You really meant a lot to me, baby. So if you use the past tense there, you're saying you used to mean a lot to me. Now you no longer mean that to me anymore. He says the memory of her, Alyssa is another word for Dido. The memory of Alyssa will never stale for me. So he's like, "I'm going to remember you fondly, great, but like we were never married. I got to go." He continues, explaining himself. He's very eloquent here, but of course, like for Dido's ears, this would not read as eloquent. It would be like, "Wow, you are really not fitting my expectations for our relationship." Okay, so she said, this is Aeneas. Now it is the rich Italian land Apollo tells me I must make for. I gotta go to Italy. Italy, named by his oracles. There is my love. There is my country. If, as a Phoenician, you are so given to the charms of Carthage, Libyan city that it is, then tell me, why begrudge the Teucrian, I guess, new lands for homesteads in Ausonia? Are we not entitled to look for realms abroad? So he's like, don't hold me back. You founded Carthage. I need to go found my city. And note the language he uses is the language of love. Dido was like, don't you love me? He's like, you meant a lot to me, but I love Italy. There is my love. There is my country. It seems like he's saying that his love is not for a person, but for like his future, his future kingdom, his future empire, Italy. He continues to speak eloquently in this breakup. He comes up with other reasons that compel him to leave. In my dreams, my father's troubled ghost admonishes and frightens me. So his father's telling him to leave. Then too, each night thoughts come of young Ascanius, my dear boy wronged, defrauded of his kingdom. So he's also saying, like, I can't, what's to become of my son? This is actually kind of a good point. If Aeneas stays in Carthage with Dido, they will need to have a child together to inherit the throne because Dido's the queen, not Aeneas. And so it would, if Aeneas stays, his son with his previous wife would maybe not have any claim to inherit the kingdom there. So Aeneas needs to go to Rome so that he can give his son a legacy and a kingdom and all that. Okay, so, and then he says Jove himself has told him, he commanded him, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so for all these reasons, Aeneas what's the word? He comes to the point, like, I have to leave you. Please no more of these appeals that set us both afire. I sail for Italy, not of my own free will. So he's like, it's against my will. This is my fate. I can't defy it. Okay, Dido has a very bad reaction to this. Okay, so first she's very, very angry at him. She yells at him. She's furious. How could he do this to her? She's Dido. She's the queen, They're in love. And then she gets really, really sad. She's like, oh no, he's really leaving. Like, I'm so bummed, She's like, I'm sorry, I'm being kind of flip with this, but she gets very, very upset, thinking about everything that he should have meant to her and that she should have meant to him. And this is all, breakups are hard. Think back to Sita Sings the Blues, Sita's relationship with Rama and how horrible she feels when she is dumped by him, basically. Dido, as she goes through these emotions, she wants him to stay. She begs him to pity her. And this is an important moment because remember that Dido falls in love with Aeneas because she pities him. He tells her of all the horrible things that happened to him at Troy, and she feels so sorry for him, and that pity leads her to love. And so she tries that tactic on him. She's like, please pity me, like we loved each other. So here, some language of her pity. She pleaded in such terms and such in tears her sorrowing sister brought him time and time again. So Anna's going to Aeneas to tell him how much Dido is pleading. But no tears moved him. No one's voice would he attend to tractably. The fates opposed it. God's will blocked the man's once kindly ears. So his ears are blocked to her. Her voice, his heart is blocked to her, to pity for her. And again, it's associated with a problem of fate, that Aeneas isn't doing this of his own free will. The fates oppose him staying there, so he has to go. So eventually, when Aeneas won't pity her, when he won't listen to her, Dido loses all hope. She's like, there's no future for me anymore. So if she was sad before, now she's completely depressed and she sees no future for herself, even though she is the queen. Think of how, especially in the ancient world, how a woman in Dido's position would be treated after her lover spurns her instead of reaffirms their marriage. Everyone would be like, you weren't even married to him. There might be kind of suggestions that she's, like slutty or like a whore or whatever it is that people would say back then. But she might have lost her grip of power through this relationship ending too. people might not respect her as much as they did in the past when she had her vow of chastity. So, you know, she's not only bummed about the breakup, she's bummed about like how this has profoundly changed her position in her society. So, you know, it probably won't surprise you that Dido does kill herself. This is a very ancient text. You know, its understanding of like the capacities for women are rather limited. You know, I think these days, you know, maybe Dido could like, I don't know, write her memoir, get her story out there. But, you know, this is the ancient world. Okay, so here's a depiction of the death of Dido. You know, she stabs herself. And I love this depiction by this painter because it shows how much people are upset by this. Like her whole city would be so mortified by the fact that their queen kills herself. You know, her sister, you know, so sad and tries to stop the bleeding. You know, this really bums me out. And here is like Aeneas's armor, and she's pointing out towards sea, where presumably Aeneas is sailing away from her. Okay, so Dido not only kills herself, but she has this kind of great moment of cursing Aeneas. So you might think back and compare this moment to those moments like in the Iliad and elsewhere when someone is killed, they usually curse the person who killed them. So even though Dido kills herself, she curses Aeneas. It's kind of amazing. So here's her lines. No pact must be between our peoples. So she means between Carthage and Rome. No pact must be between our peoples. So just like there was no pact of marriage between them, there's going to be never a pact between Carthage and Rome. No, but rise up from my bones, avenging spirit, harry with fire and sword the Dardan countrymen, now or hereafter, at whatever time, the strength will be afforded. Coast with coast in conflict I implore, and sea with sea, and arms with arms. May they contend in war, themselves and all the children of their children. So, I mean, this is a pretty powerful curse. She's not only cursing Aeneas himself, but all the children of their children. She wants the Dardans, those are the Trojans, to be harried with fire and sword now and hereafter at whatever time. So this is basically a curse of Rome now and forever. So this is kind of cool. And she predicts the conflict that will happen on the coasts and also on on land, where people will contend in war there will be a war between Carthage and Romans for a long, long time. And the avenging spirit she refers to here, rise up from my bones, avenging spirit. Critics agree that she's likely referring to Hannibal here. Remember, Hannibal was the military leader that very nearly toppled Rome in its republic iteration during the Second Punic War. So, yeah, it's kind of cool. So even though she doesn't have children, her curse, like, becomes her legacy, you know, of Carthage. Okay, so that's her curse. This is just a map reminding you how close Carthage is to Rome. So these are like the two most powerful civilizations around the time of Rome's Republic. Ultimately, when Rome defeats Carthage by defeating Hannibal in his land. So Hannibal, like, they were fighting by sea all the time, but I'm referring back to the previous lecture. But Hannibal mounts this like massive invasion of Italy from the Alps. It comes from the land, which is pretty amazing, you know, to come from down here all the way around. But anyway, Rome defeats them, and that's kind of like a profound military victory. Okay. This brings up the question, what is Virgil doing? Remember, he basically makes up Aeneas, the Aeneas story, links it to real historical events in Dido and Hannibal. So what is he doing here? Why is Virgil doing that? Why is Virgil grounding the rivalry between Carthage and Rome in this story he makes up about Dido and Aeneas and their spurned love affair? So I'm going to save this. I won't answer this during the lecture. I want you guys to think about this question. We'll talk about it during our synchronous class. Why is Virgil doing this? Like, what would be his purpose behind making up a story of doomed love to explain the rivalry, the real historical rivalry between these two civilizations? Why? Okay. But let's keep moving on. After Dido kills herself, the next section where we meet Dido again is book 6. This is when Aeneas goes into the underworld. He meets his father there. He meets a lot of people in the underworld. It's similar to Odysseus in the underworld in book 11 of the Odyssey. But but completing their sort of like love affair thing, Aeneas meets Dido in the underworld. And this is how Aeneas learns that Dido is dead. So he just leaves her, and this isn't the modern world where like news would travel very fast. So he meets her in the underworld. So it's similar to Odysseus meeting his mother in the underworld, finding out that she's dead that way. Okay, so Aeneas sees the shade of Dido, and he tries to talk to her. Dido, so forlorn, the story then that came to me was true, that you were out of life, had met your end by your own hand. Was I the cause? I swear by heaven's stars, by the high gods, by any certainty below the earth, I left your land against my will, my queen. The gods' commands drove me to do their will, as now they drive me through this world of shades, these moldy wastelands and these depths of night. And I could not believe that I would hurt you so terribly by going. Wait a little. Do not leave my sight. Am I someone to flee from? The last word destiny lets me say to you is this. So where the lines don't continue to the end of the metrical line, these indicate moments of heightened emotion. So when he's begging her to wait, do not leave my sight. Why, am I someone to flee from? Like, she's trying to flee from him. She's trying to get away from him. He's like, this is the last time I'll get to talk to you. And she's trying to leave him and run away. This, to me, speaks to the fact that I think Aeneas really did love Dido. Of course, he repeats the line that, like, the gods commanded him to do this. It was against his will. But he's sad. I mean, he's like, was I the cause of your death? Yeah, he was. I mean, she was too, but like, she kills herself because of him. This seems to me he did love her. And so, like, why does he leave her? The narrator takes over here. Aeneas, with such pleas, tries to placate the burning soul, savagely glaring back. So the shade of Dido is glaring at him, and Aeneas is trying to plead with her. Tears came to his eyes, but she had turned with gaze fixed on the ground as he spoke on, her face no more affected than if she were immobile granite or Marpesian stone. At length she flung away from him and fled, his enemy still, into the shadowy grove where he, whose bride she once had been, Sichaeus, joined her in sorrows and returned her love. Aeneas still gazed after her in tears, shaken by her ill fate and pitying her. Okay, so note here, we have another example where someone is compared to a stone because they are withholding their compassion. So this might remind you of the Ahalya episode in the Ramayana, where her husband does not pity her and in fact turns her into stone. Dido here is compared to stone. Her face is no more affected than if she were granite. So she does not pity him anymore. And so this shows us how profound the change is between the two of them. She fell in love with him because she pitied him. Now when he begs her to pity him, she refuses. And instead she goes and she rejoins her first husband, Sichaeus. That was her uncle. And he seems to return her love. So that's great. Great for Dido. But it's kind of horrible for Aeneas. He's gazing after her in tears, shaken by her ill fate and pitying her. So he still pities her, even when she refuses to pity him any longer. And of course this would be very ironic, because before she killed herself, she begged him to pity her, and he wouldn't. So now the tables have turned. Okay. All right. So this leads us to this other kind of issue with the Aeneid, is this kind of the way in which fate is different in this epic. Aeneas keeps saying over and over that he had no choice. He had to leave Dido. It's his fate to found Rome. But Dido defies her fate. It was not her fate to die. In fact, the real Dido doesn't do this. She doesn't kill herself for Aeneas because he doesn't exist. But anyway, the Dido in Virgil's depiction defies her fate. So here's lines depicting that. So the she here is Dido. For since she died, not at her fated span, nor as she merited, but before her time. So this is describing her death. She was fated to live a certain span of time, and in fact, she deserved or merited to live longer, but she died before her time. So she defies her fate in killing herself. If she's able to do that, if fate can be defied in this epic, and if Aeneas really loves Dido, as I was suggesting in previous slides, why doesn't Aeneas defy his fate to found Rome so that they can be together? You know, this is suggesting a little bit that the idea of fate might be bullshit, I guess, at least in the Aeneid. Fate in the Odyssey, fate in the Iliad seem to overpower everything else. But Dido is strong enough to defy fate in this epic. That's pretty profound. And so if fate can be defied, then why does Aeneas choose to submit to his fate, where Dido doesn't? People will say, critics will say that Dido is she's a true individual. She chooses to die for love. She chooses to die for the things that she feels most strongly about, in this epic at least. Aeneas, on the other hand, chooses fate, and specifically his fate to be a dutiful Roman. He chooses Rome. Kind of interesting. Okay, so I'm curious what you think about all this fate stuff, but we'll talk more during synchronous class. Okay, here's another moment where I think we can see that there's a pretty straightforward celebration of Aeneas and Rome and Augustus in this depiction of the shield of Aeneas. So the shield of Achilles was such a big moment in the Iliad, and Virgil tries to have just as profound a moment, if not more profound a moment, with the shield of Aeneas when he goes to war. Okay, so to compare the two, they're both forged by the smith god in the Greek and Roman universe, so Hephaestus in the Greek, Vulcan in the Roman universe. I don't think I've ever told you this, but Hephaestus / Vulcan is married to Aphrodite Venus, even though she cheats on him a lot. It's kind of interesting. Okay, both shields were commissioned by the hero's mother. So Achilles, his mother Thetis, gives the shield to him as a gift because she knows he won't live a long life. Venus, I think it might mean something different, that the goddess of love gives her son this shield. Maybe she feels bad for the fact that he lost his love in Dido and is giving him the shield now. Achilles' shield, we talked about this. You might refer back to that lecture, but it has, images of Nostos, images of Kleos all around it, kind of indicating the things that Achilles is fighting for, even though he himself won't enjoy them because he'll die in the Trojan conflict. The images symbolize Achilles' choice between his two fates. What will he choose to honor? Ultimately, he chooses death in choosing military glory. Aeneas' shield is different, though. So instead of being a thematic kind of symbol, Virgil treats Aeneas' shield as this moment to celebrate Rome. It depicts future Roman triumphs. So it's kind of cool. Aeneas is the founder of Rome, and Virgil, writing in the contemporary Roman world where the empire exists, he knows about all the glories of Rome in the past, so he puts them on Aeneas' shield, and you can read about them. They symbolize Aeneas' future progeny and their glory. These images exist for one reader in particular, Augustus. So Virgil is, he's being very crafty here. He knows exactly who he's writing this epic for. And so he knows that if he plants these celebrations of Augustus and his legacy, in his uncle Julius Caesar and in previous military glories, Augustus is going to be very, very pleased by this and then grant favors to Virgil, probably. And this is true. Augustus and Virgil, people are pretty aware that they knew each other, and Augustus, very much favored Virgil and saw him as celebrating Augustus's rule. Okay, so that's a celebration for sure. But let's get to some of the critiques, I think, towards the end of the Aeneid, the critiques of Rome. So I'm referring again to this thing I talked about last time. Neoptolemus / Pyrrhus kills Priam. When Aeneas tells this story to Dido, he is so critical of Pyrrhus, Neoptolemus, for killing this old man, this feeble old man. And yet, I hinted last time that Aeneas will act a lot like Neoptolemus / Pyrrhus in book 12 of the Aeneid. Okay, so this is referring back to book 2. So Aeneas describing the death of Priam. The old man threw his spear with feeble impact at Pyrrhus. He can't hit him though. And then Pyrrhus answers, "You'll report the news to my father in hell, basically. Now die," and is very cruel in how he kills Pyrrhus. So if you want to review this, go back to that lecture. The death of Turnus is a moment when Aeneas could pity Turnus, but refuses pity and stabs him instead. So very, very similar to what Pyrrhus does to Priam and what Achilles does to Hector, actually. So here's the death of Turnus. So Turnus he's the Italian who is supposed to marry Lavinia, the Latin princess. So when Aeneas finally goes to Italy, he finds like these various sects who are kind of in conflict with one another over control over the Italian peninsula, the Latins and the Italians. The Latins and the Italians were planning to have this marriage between Lavinia and Turnus to kind of unite their forces. But when Aeneas shows up, he's like a new force, a new political power potentially, and Lavinia's father consents to Lavinia marrying Aeneas instead of Turnus. So it's like the Latins make a connection to the Trojans instead of the Italians. Okay, so, all right, so here's the death of Turnus. This guy who Aeneas supplants as the lover of Lavinia, so they don't like each other. Turnus attempts to hurl a rock at Aeneas, but fails, and here's the moment. So Turnus tried to hurl the stone against his foe, but as he bent, and as he ran, and as he hefted and propelled the weight, he did not know himself. His knees gave way, his blood ran cold and froze. The stone itself, tumbling through space, fell short and had no impact. So it's very similar language to the scene where Priam tries to throw something and it's feeble and it has no impact. So Turnus has this moment too. Turnus is actually not a frail old man by any means. He's a very strong man, but something happens to him where he doesn't know himself. His knees gave out, and he can't, his body fails him in this moment. And so he's very vulnerable now to attack. He begs Aeneas for pity. He says, "Clearly I earned this. I ask no quarter. Make the most of your good fortune here. If you can feel a father's grief, and you too had such a father in Anchises, then let me bespeak your mercy for old age in Daunus, and return me or my body, stripped, if you will, of life to my own kin. You have defeated me. The Ausonians have seen me in defeat, spreading my hands. Lavinia is your bride, but go no further out of hatred." So of course the circumstances are different from the circumstances at the end of the Iliad, but note the connections to the Iliad. So Turnus begs for Aeneas's pity by appealing to a father's grief. This is kind of similar to Hector appealing to Achilles' pity by reminding him of fathers. And actually, that the father thing happens with Priam and Hector, but this is for sure a moment that happens in the Iliad as well, where Hector knows he's going to die. He begs Achilles to return his body to his kin, and Achilles refuses famously. So Turnus is doing that here. He's like, "Please, return me or my body." So he's like, "Return me, so like don't kill me, please. Or if you want to kill me, at least return my body to my own kin." But he does beg him to let him live. "You have defeated me. Everyone has seen me in defeat, spreading my hands. Like everyone knows that I'm done for. You married my former fiance here. Everyone knows that you won. So please just, pity me. Don't go further out of hatred. Don't kill me. You have all the power in the situation. Please pity me." And Aeneas refuses pity. So the ending of the Aeneid, Aeneas refuses to grant pity to Turnus. Aeneas raged at the relic of his anguish, worn by this man as a trophy. So there's also a similar thing going on with the Iliad, where like Turnus is wearing the armor of Aeneas, his friend, blah, blah, blah. So Virgil's very much just kind of like repeating the story of the Iliad, but in a new context. So Aeneas raged at the relic of his anguish, worn by this man as a trophy. Blazing up and terrible in his anger, he called out, "You and your plunder torn from one of mine, shall I be robbed of you? This wound will come from Pallas. Pallas makes this offering, and from your criminal blood exacts his due." He sank his blade in fury in Turnus's chest. Then all the body slackened in death's chill, and with a groan for that indignity, his spirit fled into the gloom below. So he refuses pity and stabs Turnus in fury. This is the last line of the Aeneid. We are pretty sure that Virgil anticipated having more to say, but he dies before he's able to finish. And this is how the Aeneid ends. So even though it is unfinished, I find this ending very suggestive of a lot of things. And so that's how we'll end the lecture today. Does the Aeneid critique Aeneas? The killing of Turnus by Aeneas recalls both the death of Priam by Neoptolemus and Pyrrhus, and the death of Hector by Achilles. So you can kind of see, as I've guided you to recognizing that when Aeneas kills Turnus without pity, with cruelty, he is acting like Pyrrhus, he's acting like Achilles. In both of those situations, a Trojan dies because people withhold pity. So both Priam and Hector's deaths are marked by Achaean or Greek pitilessness for Trojans. So Neoptolemus is a Greek. He lacks pity for Priam. He kills him in cold blood. Same with Hector. Achilles mercilessly kills Hector. Aeneas, however, should know a little bit better than that. He is a Trojan. He's experienced how painful it was to see Trojans die at the hands of these pitiless, cruel men, and yet he perpetuates the cycle of cruelty when given the chance to act differently. So the question would be, what is the legacy of Troy? Is the legacy of Troy one of glory, as we were suggesting earlier in the last lecture, where like Aeneas, as a Trojan devoid of his birthright as a prince of Troy, he goes to found a new kingdom in Rome. That could be the legacy of Troy, like the glory of Troy as embodied in Rome now. But the legacy of Troy might also be this like cycle of abusive violence, where lessons from the past aren't learned by the people who suffer. Where like a trauma, all Trojans are traumatized by what happened to Troy. But instead of having a moment where Aeneas could act differently, where he could feel pity for Turnus, he refuses that and instead goes on to traumatize a whole new people, the Italians. Yeah. So that might be the legacy of Troy, is this kind of like perpetuation of violence and vengeance. Okay, so back to our original question. Does the Aeneid critique Rome, Augustus, Aeneas? Things to consider. Aeneas, how he abandons and lacks pity for Dido, how he commits to fate, even though this does seem to be more of a choice rather than like, a fate. He lacks pity for Turnus. And then this last moment that I want to leave you with today, Anchises, Aeneas' father, actually has this really interesting warning to Aeneas in Book 6 when Aeneas goes to the underworld. So as Anchises is telling Aeneas of all the glorious acts of his future progeny, of his future children, Anchises embeds this warning. I see this as a warning. Anchises, so speaking to Aeneas in this part of the story, he says, "Roman, remember by your strength to rule earth's peoples, for your arts are to be these, to pacify, to impose the rule of law, to spare the conquered, battle down the proud." And I see this as kind of like a very interesting moment because, Anchises is in a way speaking to Aeneas as the founder of Rome, but he might also be speaking to all Romans and a particular reader in a specific reader in particular, Augustus. Roman, remember your strength to rule Earth's people. I think this is a moment when Anchises and Virgil, through Anchises, is speaking directly to Augustus, calling him Roman. So, rule people. Remember that you have the strength to rule everyone, all of Earth, but you should. Your arts are to be these. Arts in this situation are the things that you create. So, you have the strength to rule, but your creation should be these. You should have the goal of pacifying. You should aim for peace. You should aim to impose the rule of law. So, law, not your power to rule, but law to rule. And then to spare the conquered, to have mercy for the people that you conquer. And then, of course, you can battle down the proud. If people are proud, you can, you don't have to spare them necessarily. But once you conquer a people, you should spare them. So I see this as a moment when, like, out of the text itself, and the sort of like made up story that Virgil's making up, he's speaking to Augustus specifically. And so, think back to Virgil is writing this glorious epic about Rome, but he grew up in a time when everyone was fighting. It was just rampant social wars, civil wars, until finally Augustus is the emperor who's able to achieve peace in the realm. And that's a great thing. Peace is wonderful. But if that peace comes at the expense of these like ethical things, then that's not a great thing. So, of course, Virgil wants to embed this sort of warning to the first emperor to actually choose peace and law over his own personal glory. So, Rome. Feel free to ask questions in our synchronous class, but I did want to give you kind of a sense that even the epic purporting to be all about the glory of Rome, it still embeds hearty critiques over the concepts of empire and Roman glory and Roman duty. Okay. Homework for next time. I'm just going to briefly go over this because I'll also post this in NYU Brightspace, but our last class will be talking even more about critique of Rome through Ovid, his epic about Rome, which is called the Metamorphoses. This is quite a long epic, and it has so many stories in it. I've excerpted just several for us. Each of these stories has a lot to do with rape, so trigger warning, but we'll talk about that next time. Your homework, so as you read these stories from the various books, to help yourself make sense of them, find who the main characters are in the episode. So I've given you hints here in the Apollo and Daphne episode, the Io and Jove episode, etc. So focus on those main characters. Are they human or god? Are they male or female? Because I think that will matter a lot in stories about rape, of course. Ask yourself, so that the epic is all about metamorphosis or changes. So there's a transformation in every story that Ovid tells. So what is the transformation in the episode you read? What brings it about? There might be multiple ones. Do you see the transformation as a liberation? Like, does it grant the transformed creature freedom? Or is the transformation a tragedy for the character who transforms? And then take notes of any quotes you think important. And we'll talk more about this epic next time.